UK South headquarters. As political parties intensify campaigns, the Independent National Electoral Commission says political parties and candidates must play by the rules and avoid utterances that will heat up the polity. The Chief Press Secretary to INEC Chairman Kayode Idowu said this in an interview with our correspondent Gabriel Odu.
In law, parties are expected to begin their campaigns 90 days before elections. And so it is desirable and expected that parties will maintain and abide by the code of conduct that they sign.
And let the electorate also know that without your PVC you can't vote. And if you say the election is none of your business, it's sad because the election is your business. It's your business is the only time that you have authority as in Nigeria to select who will represent you.
Now, the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria nationwide Monday commenced an indefinite strike to press home their demands for financial autonomy of the judiciary. Correspondent Abdul Fattah Adeniran reports that all courts in the Federal Capital City remained under lock and key. Now to other matters, Supervising Minister of Information, Dr. Nuruddin Mohammed, has assured Nigerian workers of the federal government's sincerity in resolving labor disputes as well as respect agreement reached. The minister was reacting to received bridges of healthy the demands for welfare package, good working environment and restructure of certain government policies, but calls for the cooperation and understanding of the workers.
Unions themselves understanding that they have a responsibility to themselves and to Nigerians through the government. What we want to assure Nigerians is that while it is within the fundamental rights of the labor unions to embark, it is to make sure that that is done in a very responsible and non-destructive way.
That report concludes the news. It's back to Claire and Ibrahim.
Many thanks indeed, Rhoda. Now straight into our business package for today, as put together by Shikeola Ikbinai. She's telling us that the federal government is reiterating its commitment to small and medium enterprises development in the country. Let's get the details now.
Good morning and welcome to Business News. As Nigerian government makes efforts at developing the small and medium enterprises in the country, utmost attention will be given to Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDAN, to help it fulfill its mandate of growing small businesses in the country for economic growth. Minister of Trade and Investment Olusegun Aganga, who disclosed this during a visit to the agency, said efforts are on to synergize with key agencies that can contribute to the development of SMEs in the country. Noting that SME sector is very key to the nation's achievement of Vision 2020, Aganga charged SMEDAN to live up to its role as a major game changer in the sector.
It is the only sector where if the economy is strong, it's green. If the economy is weak and people are losing their jobs, it's green. Because when you lose your job, you're not going to sit at home. You try and apply for a job, but at the end of the day, you start a business, you start something. You've become an MSME. And in Nigeria, it's so important.
He pointed out funding as one of the key areas of concern for small and medium enterprises development, which he says is already receiving adequate attention. He encouraged SMEDAN to be more focused in its core mandate of promoting small businesses for the economic well-being of the nation. Reports from the Nigerian Stock Exchange show that the huge loss of 1.75 trillion naira recorded by Nigerian stocks in the year 2014 can largely be attributed to falling economic fundamentals of the country rather than market fundamentals, as the Nigerian Stock Exchange moved out of old ways significantly during the course of the year. Studies have shown recently that investors are now becoming more sensitive to sentiments and macroeconomic indicators in emerging markets, Nigeria being the largest market in West Africa. The key economic fundamentals like weak currency, high interest rates, uncertain political space, debt posture, illiquidity, growing insecurity, and the likes have put undue pressure on the markets. Nevertheless, market watchers say the management of the Nigerian stock market sustained the transformational posture, which helped cushion the impact of these factors as the market experienced a peaceful trading atmosphere, commendable improvement in trading efficiency, increased regulatory oversight, and renewed compliance initiatives. Technically, market analysts say they had expected that 2014 will be the year of consolidation into full market recovery in the Nigerian stock market, going by the strong bargain trends and trading pattern recorded in the previous years that market recovery commenced, that is in the year 2011 to 2013. And the euro slid to a 9-year low against the dollar as investors predicted the European Central Bank ECB may act to stimulate the economy. The euro fell by 1.2% against the dollar to $1.186, marking its weakest level since March 2006 before recovering slightly to $1.193. The drop follows European Central Bank President Mario Draghi's comment indicating the bank could soon start quantitative easing. Greek political turmoil also weighed on the currency, although the European Central Bank had already cut interest rates to record low level and also bought some bonds issued by private companies. But on Friday, Mr. Draghi had hinted that the bank might soon start a policy of quantitative easing by buying government bonds, thus curbing its counterparts in the UK and the US. The purpose will be to inject cash into the banking system, stimulate the economy, and push prices higher. And that's business news. I am Shikeola Ikpenaye. Good Morning Nigeria continues. Have a blessed business day.
Now that will be coming right after this break. Stay with us.
The time has come once more for us to make the right choice. We did it before, we can do it again. Let us lay aside our differences and think about Nigeria. Let us vote for good luck Jonathan again.
Vote Good Luck Jonathan and Namadi Sambo for President and Vice President 2015. Vote PDP. This message is brought to you courtesy Transformation Ambassadors of Nigeria. Down for one vision, Nigeria.
All right, Claire and I have got about 9 papers here in the studio this morning, and we'll be taking a look at them in just a moment. Good morning to you, Mr. Ayo. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, Nigeria.
It's good to know that you're handling the Harmattan very well. It wasn't like yesterday.
Oh, I see. So it showed yesterday.
It did.
Thank you.
Good to know you're fine now.
Better, thanks.
Now we've got a few papers. Let's quickly see what they have on their back pages or front pages. Jonathan squandered $55 billion all money, OBJ. There are riders to that story. It's on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper for this morning. My government was above board, IBB, details on page 8. There are picture stories of school children back in school after resumption, also making the front page of the Vanguard. Let's see what People's Daily is saying this morning. It also has that story that appears to be trending in almost all the newspapers this morning. So People's Daily captioned its own story. Obasanjo explodes again. How Jonathan squandered $55 billion reserve oil funds. Blames president for current economic crisis. All the details on page 2. INEC closes submission of presidential Guba NAS forms. Details on page 2. That's at the bottom of the People's Daily this morning. Nigerian pilot is next. The Nigerian pilot, I have no grudge against Jonathan, but Obasanjo story on page 4. Okonjo-Iweala frustrating judiciary autonomy. Judges, that's on page 6. Buhari to get funds from Arab donors. We are riders to that story. It's not true, says AID. APC plans fake polling rating for ex-head of state, PDP. Details on page 4. And workers shut down courts nationwide. The details on page 5. There are promotional stories at the bottom of the Nigerian pilot there. Okorocha lied on federal projects. Minister Jonathan will campaign in Adamawa, Borno, Yobe, says Ghana. And auto crashes claim 31 in Benue, Bauchi, Kogi. Oil falls below $50 per barrel, and FG releases 1.33 billion naira to farmers. That's the Nigerian pilot. Next, the blueprint. And just below the masthead there, you'll find the story. Boko Haram kills 40, burned 75 houses in Yobe, with the details on page 6. And Jonathan rubber-stamped occupation of Palestine. And that's according to Nakomio, with the details on page 47. 21 billion naira fundraising, not for Jonathan campaign, says PDP, with the details on page 6. It's an interesting photo story that's showing the main gate of the Supreme Court under lock and key when the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, JUSUN, embarked on strike in Abuja yesterday. The details on page 12. At the bottom of the blueprint, ex-Tetfon boss Yakubu backs Igbo title. Details on page 4. And the last paper for me is National Mirror, also talking about judiciary workers' strike paralyzes courts. CJ and judiciary officers locked out, with the rider hold accountant general responsible, says JUSUN. At the bottom of the National Mirror, I have no quarrel with Jonathan, but Obasanjo says no apprehension over general elections. Details on page 5. 34 killed in Bauchi, Kogi, Benue auto crashes is on page 52 of the National Mirror. From me, that's it, Claire.
Okay, I'll take up with the Daily Trust, and it leads with the caption, "We are saints compared to our successors." This is coming from IBB. It writes with "Why we toppled Buhari," and a picture story there and details of excerpts from the former head of state's speech there. Now, just below that story, that excerpt, treading at the bottom, Obasanjo, no support for candidate without good plan. There you have it. And then stock market opens with 241 billion naira loss. Details are on page 25. And I'll quickly just go to the inside page on pages 3 and 4. On page 3, there's a story there, and it reads ACF. ACF stands for Arewa Consultative Forum. Others condemn Bakare's call for shift in election. ACF, others condemn Bakare's call for shift in election. And below that, just below, Nigeria's crude oil exports to Europe and Asia drop. And then I'll quickly flip over to page 5. And on page 5, there's a story on the inside column there, just beside the picture story of that traffic gridlock along Yanyan Road yesterday morning, of course, as a result of the checkpoint in the Kubu area. The picture story there is on page 5. That's the story you get from the district here within the FCT, I call the MNK district. That's the gridlock there. And then just the story on the inside column there. Female student father nabbed with 2 grenades in Taraba. The camera can just get that story. Female student father nabbed with 2 grenades in Taraba. That's the story on, of course, on the other side of that paper. And I quickly move on now to the Newswatch Times. Newswatch Times, and again, all the papers carry the story of former President Obasanjo's meeting with the Southwest women, but they have come in different captions. And this is probably one of the captions that I think it's more, objective. I don't know, but you will review this things later. Newswatch Times reads, "I have no grudge against Jonathan Obasanjo," and it writes with, "but I'm ready to defend whatever is good for Nigeria with my life." And just below that, you have a picture, a story of the former president in the midst of the Southwest women leaders after his meeting at the Hilltop residence in Abeokuta, and other stories trending on the front page of Newswatch Times. But just above the masthead, New Year tragedies, 31 perish in Bauchi, Benue, Kogi road crashes, and 18 luxury buses raised in Anambra. Adra, just a few days ago, we were talking about, we had the FRSC man come here to talk about developments this year, or rather last year. And all that, but this is coming at the weekend. This accident seemed to have occurred over the weekend, and along Bauchi, Benue, Kogi, and road crash is quite unfortunate. New Year tragedy, it's on the front page of Newtwork Times. And quickly, Daily Times leads with Obasanjo campaigns against Jonathan. That's how it captions its own version of that meeting. Ex-BOT chair couldn't have uttered those words, and that's coming from PDP again. The picture story of the women, Southwest women leaders with the former president there in the midst of them there. Opposition can't bomb, in quote, president out of office. This is coming from Fayoshi. Ekiti governor asks Buhari to present certificate. Now, on the other side, judiciary workers lock out lawyers and litigants. Details on page 7. That's Daily Times. And quickly now to Daily Sun. Daily Sun again captions its own version. Obasanjo declares war, has other trend riders there on the front page. But the picture story making the front page of the Daily Sun there, court closed. Kaduna High Court under lock and key as judicial officers began nationwide strike yesterday. The details of that story on page 7. Now, Jonathan Bishop Chukwuma bombs Mbaka. That's it on the left column there. He should declare how much he has collected from opposition, says Anglican priest. And Catholic Church must call him to order, he insists. And there are other stories there. Of course, Jonathan means well for Nigeria, says Carlo. It's also trending at the bottom there. That's Daily Sun. And finally, leadership also has its own version of President Obasanjo's meeting with the ladies. And its own version is captioned, excess crude account. Obasanjo questions use of $35 billion. And then just below the picture story there of the judicial workers at the gate of the High Court of Justice, Oyo State, you have external reserves dip by 20.9% as crude oil, as oil falls below $50 per barrel. Now, Catholic Church disagrees with Father Mbaka. It's on page 8. And just the story trending at the bottom there. I built 9 universities, 50 Almajiri schools in 20 months. This is coming from President Goodluck Jonathan. Details on page 4. Bio.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes, I talked about how the papers have captioned their own stories.
Well, you see, there is a story. The former president met with market women in Abeokuta, and the issue of the foreign reserve came up. Particularly, he also alluded to the state of the foreign reserve while he was in office. Naturally, when we are doing comparison, he will talk about what the situation was during his term, and also talk about the situation that it is now. However, what seemed to be missing within that contrast is what the reserve was just about a year ago, and how it got depleted, and then the circumstances also within the economy. However, newspapers tend to cast headlines depending on how they will catch the attention of the readers. If, however, the headline is cast in such a way that it does not convey the substance or the body of the story, that becomes commercialism and sensationalism, and not journalism.
But remember, we're also talking about preventing, forestalling electoral violence, and how we can guard our utterances and the way we caption our stories, so that it doesn't appear to be incisive.
Yes.
Now, I think some of our, editors and newspapers should also take this into consideration. And incidentally, we'll be looking at the media's role in all of this in one of our editions on this program.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. In fact, one of the reports we have here specifically emphasized the position of a senior advocate of Nigeria, His name is Dr. Yusuf Ali. And what did he say? He said political parties don't respect their constitution. And he went on. You soon see the link. He says that presently, he even as a lawyer is already in court trying to defend the situation of litigation. He says the political class, the contestants and supporters should avoid emotive and highly charged statements. We should be careful with inciting statements like, if somebody doesn't win, Nigeria will come to an end. He also cited other examples saying that if Y does not win, blood will flow. If anybody's rigs election, they won't be alive to tell the story. He says such statements is very emotive and should not be published. He went on to say that the press should also help us, that when such statements are made on the political rostrum, they should either tone it down or expunge it completely from the politics. So the sensibilities and the high tension and high language is already prevalent there, but we need to caution our colleagues, and particularly the politicians too, to try and tamper their language with, and reduce the level of the emotivity in what they say. Political parties, today is the deadline for political parties seeking to field candidates for the presidential election. 20th of January is the deadline for those for gubernatorial. You will recall that the first election that will come is that of the presidential and the National Assembly. INEC on January 13th is also going to publish the list of registered voters for the election. The concern and the worrying here is, up till now, they are still worrying and concerns about PVC, which will be used for the elections. And if you are going to use PVC for election, it means your name must be on the voters register. There have been complaints about PVC in Lagos, there have been complaints in Niger, there have been complaints in Taraba. And even politicians are even exploiting this. Some are already saying that it is the states in the south that are suffering from PVC problems, excluding the states from the north. And this is not true. There are states whereby INEC still have challenges about PVC, and that we hope that this will be resolved before those days. Well, the report about former military president Ibrahim Babangida making statements about his tenure have also been reported widely. And one of such is that in spite of the annulment of the election, the 1993 election still professed to be the most credible election. And the former military president says that yes, June 12 is a day in the history of Nigeria and the day that the most credible election was held. He went on to say that on June 23rd, he was on air to tell Nigerians why it had to be annulled. But whatever he said, nobody was interested. And therefore, having fallen out of tune, he had no choice but to step aside. That his statement of stepping aside also has been given interpretation as if he was stepping aside and hoping to come back. But he said that was just simply a military terminology. When there is a column of soldiers, you remember during your youth corps, when you are marching, when you fall out of that, all you need to do is to step aside for the column to continue. The University of Ilorin has said that the hue and cries and fears about electronic voting is very unnecessary, that electronic voting is actually possible in Nigeria. And they have demonstrated this within the university itself. For the past 2 years, they've been able to use electronic voting to conduct their own elections. Well, that is a microcosm of a society. I don't know how that will extrapolate to the larger society, but the contention is that the electronic voting is not something that we should fear. It is possible. It was done in India. The intention of INEC was to do it, whereas there's a preventive clause in the constitution that stopped it. The Catholic Secretariat of Nigeria has called upon the Catholic Bishop of Enugu to call Reverend Father Ejike Mbaka to order over the excesses of the Reverend gentleman. Reverend Father Ralph Madu, who is the Catholic Secretariat, says that when somebody claims that the Spirit is telling him something, who are you to question him? But he says that no matter what the Spirit tells you, you have to be careful about how you say that across. Other reverend pastors too have come out to say that his pronouncement on November 14th was seemingly like saying Hosanna. And on 1st of December, he turned around to say, crucify him. And that is causing a lot of conflict even within his own flock. And therefore, they have cautioned that godly men should be very careful not to be dragged into the political turf. Another reverend gentleman, this time, is the Bishop of Ogwea. He says that God has already decided the outcome of the 2011 elections. And that decision was taken long ago, and then no one can change it. The bishop, whose name is James Oruori, said that rather than exhibit fear, Nigerians should be calm and abide by God's decision, which no man can change. That is an advice from the pulpit. Judiciary is not also at peace. Staff of the Judiciary Staff Union commenced its strike yesterday, and therefore we find the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the federal courts here in Abuja were all under lock and key. The problem now is that even litigations that came from the primaries of the political context are now come under the lock of key of the strike of the judicial staff. They are asking that the decision of the Federal High Court that the financial autonomy of the judiciary should be abided by has not been carried out, and they are insisting that the strike is indefinite until that decision is taken. Also, JOHESU, the Joint Health Service Union, are still continuing with their strike that commenced on November 12th. We must praise the decision of JOHESU in Kano and some other northern states because of incidents of insurgency and attack and some bombings that took place. They called off their strike and were giving health care and attention to most of the victims, particularly in Kano. Now that they say that most of the victims from the last bombing in Kano have been discharged, they have now gone back to the strike. But one needs to appeal to all those who are concerned that there is need to help the masses who are suffering, because many hospitals have had to send away their patients. And whether you like it or not, this now will now be forced to go and seek treatment either from quacks or native doctors, which will not help our status. Nigeria has come also under the world record. You recall the last December, 9,999 choristers singing in Carol? Well, it has now been confirmed that that is the largest choral of choristers singing in one destination all over the world. And the trustees of the Guinness Book of Record have verified and certified that the previous record were 1,540 choristers singing. And what we had in Akwa Abasi, Ubom state of our Nigeria, with 9,999 choristers, is now world record in the Guinness Book of Record. Thank you, Claire.
On that note, we'll round up this segment. Bayo Tobi, thank you very much for stopping by as always.
Thank you for having me.
And I do hope you have a great day. This is Good Morning Nigeria. Time for another break.
Said to you, we really love you. Thank you for being with us.
Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
This is not just another year. This is my year. It's the year I become a better me. I am going to do things I have never done before. I am going to do ordinary things in extraordinary ways. And everyday things in new ways. I will break my records and set new ones. This is 2015, the year of a better me with internet solutions that enhance my lifestyle. MTN, everywhere you go.
Shopee has ensured the reconstruction of the Abuja Lokoja Road and the East-West Road in Port Harcourt.
The standard gauge rail tracks from Abuja to Kaduna and Lagos to Kano indicates that our trains are coming back.
The second Niger Bridge in the southeast and the local Oweto Bridge in the north central are in progress, thanks to Shopee.
Shopee's mass transit program has made transportation easier for Nigerians.
Shopee has rehabilitated over 1,000 health centers across Nigeria.
Shopee has provided mama kits to pregnant women, and polio is on the verge of eradication.
Shopee has also ensured the provision of social amenities and through its various training programs for young people guarantees a better future.
Shopee, delivering service with integrity.
Thank you for joining the conversation this morning. You're on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service. Now, in a few weeks' time, it will be time for Nigerians to go to the polls to elect their leaders at the various tiers of government. Now, before now, some international organizations and highly placed individuals in the country have raised and are still raising alarms over perceived electoral violence during and before and after the elections. Now, to avert this, various stakeholders in the electoral process have been intensifying efforts to forestall any breakdown of law and order that might arise from the conduct of the polls. Gideon Ifadi kickstarts our conversation this morning with a look at the previous electoral violence in the country and the consequences they've had on the nation's socio-economic and political development.
Hereby call on senior citizens, parents, and guardians to advise their wards by obeying the law of the land and to desist from any act of lawlessness forthwith.
That was in 2011 in the aftermath of the violence that erupted at the 2011 presidential election. The violence led to the destruction of property and loss of lives. Curfew was imposed in some parts of northern states to prevent further escalation of the violence. As the drum of war beat, signaling a repeat of post-election violence in the 2015 elections, Nigerians are saying no more bloodshed on the altar of political violence.
Nobody is praying for violence. You can see the issue of insurgency, nobody is happy about it, isn't it? So violence is not something we pray for, isn't it? The issue of it, we need a credible election to be a peaceful one, isn't it? But there's an advice I want to give INEC. The issue of voters registration. Many people will be disenfranchised as I'm talking to you now.
And so the only way I think we can avoid violence in the election is for politicians to, control their utterances. Be careful of the words they push out to the public, to their supporters. They may not mean what they say, but their supporters may misunderstand them.
It looks like, with the way it is right now, it looks as if it's not going to be easy, But I believe if all of us are going to be together, be one, and if we're going to stay away from it, that's just basically what I'm trying to say. We're going to have a good election, free of violence.
Post-election violence is not peculiar to the 2011 elections alone, but this is an occurrence that has characterized elections in the country since the colonial era.
I'm a politician by practice, and automatically from every view of most politicians, there's every need to spare Nigeria from further violence. 2015 election will be a free and fair election, I bet you. Everybody is going to play according to the rules and the ethics of.
Nigerians are prayerful. With our prayers and the revelations from God, everybody should go and sleep. There's no problem. There will be no problem at all.
That there are some in our midst who seek to reenact a stalemate in the political process. My fellow countrymen and women. Enough is enough.
Section 81 of the Electoral Act 2010 prescribes punishment for contravention of Section 227 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which is aimed at stemming electoral offences. How effective are these punishments, and to what extent have they been enforced in the last 16 years of the present democratic dispensation?
Gideon Ifade setting the tone for our conversation this morning. Now I'd like to introduce our first guest here in the studio in Abuja, Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, a professor of political science and a senior fellow, Center for Democracy and Development, Abuja. Professor Ibrahim, thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
Now let me also introduce Professor Etanibe Alemika, a professor of criminology, University of Jos. He is at the moment in our Jos Network Center. Good morning for you, Professor Alemika. Professor Alemika.
Good morning.
Professor Alemika.
Good morning.
Alemika. To both of you gentlemen. Claire, perhaps I should kickstart. We are talking apprehensions, we're talking predictions as to electoral violence in Nigeria. Some are saying during, some are saying after the 2015 general elections. We've had such predictions and apprehensions expressed by the European Union, the United Nations, and indeed some highly placed Nigerians have also come out to say, look, this is our fear. Why such apprehensions and this kind of predictions?
Well, I don't think prediction is the right word. I think there's a lot of concern that given present tendencies, we might end up having elections with a lot of violence. But what everybody is saying is that we should take all the necessary measures to ensure that we do not end up with electoral violence. This is an important election in the history of this country, and a successful 2015 election will be a strong sign about the consolidation of democracy in this country. What's on the cards, therefore, is for all stakeholders, the political class, political parties and candidates, civil society, INEC, security agencies, to do all they can to ensure that the conditions for free, fair, and above all, peaceful elections prevail, and that the outcome of that election will be respected by Nigerians.
Prof, perhaps the issue is, are these apprehensions founded in the first place, despite the assurances we keep getting from the electoral umpire, the security officers, and indeed Mr. President? There are apprehensions. Are they founded at all in the first place?
Yes, they are founded because we've seen that there's a lot of language out there in the political arena that could incite people. There are a lot of assumptions that Party A must win, which can always pose problem, because if people believe that Party A must win and Party A doesn't win, that could now generate violence. So it's really a question of the culture of electoral democracy. Nobody knows who will win the elections, and the message to give people is go out, listen to the issues, and vote for those issues you think come closest to your heart, and the votes will be counted. Whoever is the winner is the winner. I think that's the message we have to place on the cards. And definitely the word is an important instrument in democracy. You must be careful the words you choose. Do not use incendiary words. Do not use words that will cause division and that will make people act in a way that's not normal. It's a time, I think, in our country where we need to talk to people that keep to the issues, keep to what you want to see as the outcome of these elections. and let the votes of the people decide who is the winner.
Okay, let's quickly get back to Professor Tanibi Elemeka in Jos. Prof, compliment of the season to you. In our earlier rundown of the highlights of our program, we made reference to the wild, wild west, of the 1964-65 in the then Western region. And now, of course, we talked about, the the 2011 election violence. Now, let's not even look at the sponsors of violence, but let's look at the perpetrators of the violence in 2015. These are mostly youths who may not have witnessed what happened in the early 60s and probably in 2011. Majority of them right now, you talk to them about violence, they're probably complacent and nonchalant about what is likely to happen. Prof, could you quickly paint a picture of the likely consequences of violence within 2015 election in Nigeria, for Nigeria, and for the African continent?
I think we already have very serious insecurity problems. And if we compound that with electoral violence in 2015, we will actually be doing a lot of harm to our political system and the unity of the country. And I think it's in this respect that everyone involved in the electoral process, from the president to security agencies, the INEC, the politicians and the voters and the rest of us, need to be careful not to do anything that will cause electoral violence during the 2015 general elections. I think Jibril Ibrahim has already identified some of the possible causes of violence during this period. But I think, as you said, yes, the perpetrator will be the young people, but the sponsors are not young. They're the same actors of 64 largely. Look at the age of the major actors in our political process today. A lot of them are in their 70s. They have names in the First Republic, in the Second Republic, in the Third Republic, and the current Republic. So we actually have a continuity in terms of sponsors of violence among the political parties. Yet the recruits and the foot soldiers may be young. So if we can persuade those sponsors, I think we can do something about the perpetrators. And very diverse groups actually have responsibility in this respect and should do what they need to do to ensure that there's no electoral violence. But I think it's important to understand what factors may lead to those violence in 2015. I think we focus so much on utterances, but I think also actions of others outside of the voters may be important. I think the exercise of state power is necessary. I think this is the time to be very cautious that the government in power does not make statement that appears that opposition is being intimidated, because when there is any sense of lack of neutrality, people may resort to self-help. Just like the opposition also must ensure that it does not make incendiary statements. So I think we all have responsibility in this respect, but my fear is that as it is today, critical organs are still not conscious. I think everyone is issuing threats, but not many seem to be taking their own responsibility very seriously.
Okay, let's get back to Professor Ibrahim Jibrin. We already having a feel of what is happening in the Northeast. Everybody is concerned about what is happening, and that because we need to paint this picture for people to understand why we must play our roles to ensure that 2015 is violence-free. So already, if that happens and we don't pray for that, it's a child's play, isn't it?
Yeah, Nigeria is in a very difficult situation today. We have the insurgency in the northeast. In much of the northwest and north central, you have very high levels of rural banditry and cattle rustling. You have a lot of kidnapping in the south. And there's a very high level of small arms and light weapons circulating in the country. So the situation is extremely delicate. And I think the point Professor Alemeka was making, if we add into this difficult situation electoral violence, then things may get completely out of control, especially with the number of arms available out there. You know, the important issue about the states is that the control of violence is supposed to be restricted to the security agencies alone. The reality in this country today is that it is not. And what we need to do is to reclaim a normal state in this country where the security agencies are in control of the instruments of violence and citizens are able to live peaceful lives. And elections can play an important role in bringing down the political temperature if that election is free and fair, and if the political class play their roles correctly and accept verdicts that are legitimate. That will calm down the political atmosphere. That will improve confidence in the state and its institutions. And that's really the direction we need to go in this country.
Okay, we also have joined us here in the Abuja studio the Force Public Relations Officer, Mr. Emmanuel Ojukwu. Mr. Ojukwu, thank you for joining in our conversation this morning, for stalling electoral violence this year as we approach the elections. Now, you must have such enormous task ahead of you.
Yeah, we do. We're gauging the political temperature, as my friend just mentioned, and we are conscious of the fears and apprehensions of Nigerians. We want to make give them an assurance that 2015 has come, elections will come and go, and Nigeria will remain. There is really no cause for alarm because all that it needs for the police to put in place are already in place. And we have the will, we have the ability, we have the capability. Above all, the willingness of Nigerians to live in peace. Those are our strongest weapons, and we believe everything will come to pass and nobody's face will be scratched.
Well, CP Ojukwu, perhaps part of your planning is this election planning and monitoring committee that you already have in place. Perhaps what should be discussing this morning is to find out what are the parameters of this committee. What exactly is the committee supposed to be doing?
It's not really a committee. It's a unit set up by the Inspector of Police, Suleiman Abba, way back in September. It's called the Election Security and Monitoring Unit. So their job is to get the temperature, let us know what is happening within the political circle, and then to help us fine-tune our strategies on the elections. You do know that as the elections are heating up now, the politicking is heating up, a lot of talks are going all over the places. We know what people feel and how they are reacting or responding to them. That unit collates all that and daily informs and briefs the Inspector General of Police on what is going. That will enable the Inspector General of Police to decide the next line of action. But by and large, that unit is to help us, give us a roadmap on what we'll do as the elections come up.
What would be your focus? What would be the main focus of this committee? What's the philosophy? What's the rationale? Who are you actually, engaging at the moment? Is it just the electorate, the players, the parties, or who are your target?
No, you see, this unit is a unit under our operations department. As I said, it's headed by a commissioner of police and a few officers who form the think tank, and then they advise the IG on what is going in the political circle. By and large, the entire Nigeria police is our own committee. In November and then early December, the Inspector of Police met with senior officers, and you are well aware that we had a seminar with INEC and other key stakeholders, MBA and development partners, in which we are tuning our officers, graduate tuning our officers to what it takes to run the elections, to play our own role in the elections. We are not the umpire. We are there just to provide security, and we shall do that.
What is different about this unit in terms of equipment, in terms of staffing, in terms of modus operandi? What is is it just another unit?
No, it's just an office.
Just an office?
It's not a committee, so to speak. It's just an office headed by a commissioner of police, a seasoned officer who has worked with INEC for a number of years. We also have an INEC police that works with INEC on a daily basis. His own is to monitor what is going on, bring the IG on a daily basis to enable us prepare very well for the elections. And we are well aware, we have a handbook for every police officer to use to guide his conduct, his action and utterances before, during and after the elections. And all our paraphernalia, all our equipment are being prepared for what may happen after elections should anybody want to repeat the 2011 scenario.
Let me ask one question before we cross over to Professor in Jos. What people are saying is, by this committee, it will appear as if you're adopting a let's wait and see what happens, instead of actually engaging the people. Perhaps if you take it a little further and engage the political class, engage civil society organizations directly, and as to enlightening them, about issues concerning the election, perhaps it will be better. That means you're being proactive.
Yes, our proactivity is not in doubt. By, say, from August last year till late, even yesterday, Commissioner of Police of various state commands have been meeting with political actors in their domain. I do know that as time comes on, the IG may think it fit to have such a meeting at the national level, but such meetings are already going on at all the local levels. So we are getting proactive, we are involving the people, and we know Nigerians want this election to come and go, and Nigeria will remain. That is our greatest weapon. So we have already engaged them in that exercise.
Okay, getting back to Professor Tanebe in Jos. Prof, the election violence is usually occurs as a result of public perception about electoral malpractice, and the general perception is that, look, it's part of the system. People just commit these electoral malpractices and get away with it. They don't have confidence in the system of justice system and all that. What role should the umpires, the stakeholders really be playing so that we remove this kind of perception?
Yes, you are right. I think there are actually three major issues that tend to lead to violence. First is perception of effectiveness of the management body. I think the issue of PVC was raised earlier, the issue of voters register. On the day of election, if people can't find their name, it's already a heightened situation and people might resort to violence. So there is a question of efficiency. The lack of it may generate violence. The second one is perception of partiality or lack of it on the part of the management, election management body, as well as the security agency and the government in power. And the third one, of course, is related to whether there are fraudulent practices during the election. And I think we need to take the three sources together in order to prevent violence in 2015. And I think what we should be planning, we do not have much time, is to prevent electoral violence rather than try to suppress the violence when they have occurred, because our capacity to suppress violence is not very strong. So I think we can use all the resources, both cultural, social, religious, and other means available to ensure that we educate the citizens, that we interact with the political contestants, to ensure that violence does not occur. So I think what we need to do is to indeed take every measure, as you said, not just about malpractices, about encouraging the participants to tune down their language, to ensure that INEC has take the necessary measures that will show that it's effective and efficient, and for INEC as well as the security agencies and the government to ensure that they are not perceived as partial in favor of any political party. I think these are the general measures we need to undertake. Of course, we have the National Orientation Agency. I think a lot of civic education need, to be conducted within the very short space. Civil society will know they'll do their own, but we need a coherent one from the National Orientation Agency telling us that this is the nation we have. As it said, we have no other one. And if we burn it down on the basis of one election, then we are the greater loser rather than the politicians who, of course, may run out of the country. So I think what we need to do is to build capacity at this time and also to create an environment that shows effectiveness, impartiality, and also capacity to deliver election that has very minimal cases of fraud.
All right, Prof, we'll still get back to you. Let me come back here in Abuja and speak to Professor Ibrahim. Now that we've begun to examine the critical stakeholders as far as election is concerned, you can't take away the place of a very credible dispute conflict resolution mechanism in place. That is where the judiciary now features very prominently. What kind of judiciary are Nigerians expecting to come to play as far as resolving election disputes are concerned? What should they be doing differently?
I think the first point to make is that the level of dependence on the judiciary shouldn't be too high, because if most candidates need to resort to the judiciary to settle the outcome of an election, it means the electoral process itself had become very problematic. The key thing for the judiciary really is to be able to be an institution on which politicians could feel they could rely on in cases where things have not gone the wrong way. The judiciary is, of course, constrained by what the law states, and one of the key constraints of the judiciary in terms of electoral dispute resolution is the time frame imposed by the Electoral Act for the resolution of cases. Often, as we saw in 2011, they didn't have enough time. Time ran out before they ended up listening to all the evidence. And in such situations, anybody who had already been given a certificate retains it automatically, whether or not that certificate of return was given in good faith. So I think this is why I think the judiciary is important, but it shouldn't be what we rely on to solve all problems. What is important is for the electoral process itself to be conducted correctly. I think we should all remember after the Ondo electoral violence in 1983, and there was a judicial panel set up to review the elections. And one of the issues Justice Babalakin, who chaired the commission, said is that, look, the judiciary can solve a problem in a context where the electoral body didn't do its work correctly, in that case FEDECO, in a situation where the police was not neutral, and in a situation in which the politicians were messing up with the political process. So it's this situation that we need for all stakeholders to play their role correctly. And when they do that, you then do not have to rely on the judiciary. I, for instance, followed elections in Niger Republic. And in the last 5 elections, no case went to the judiciary because the process was done correctly. The losers and the winners all accepted the results, and therefore you do not need the judiciary. My hope is that we will not need the judiciary in 2015. Okay,
let's get back to CP Ojukwu. CP, the need for early warning signs so that you are able to nip them in the bud before they erupt into something bigger, something violent. In this case, of course, the electoral violence. Now, in our own case, the early warning signs are there for us to see. Utterances by the big players in the game of politics, the use of abusive languages, emotive words, name calling, and what have you. And we don't seem to have, done well in nipping, these early warning signs in the bud. The players are having a field day. How are you handling this, the early warning signs?
Okay, this is part of what the election security unit is doing. And as you do well know, our preparation for 2015 election began actually in 2013. So what we are doing now is just crossing the T's and dotting the I's and getting set for the D-Day. We've seen such signs and we've responded appropriately. I can tell you that during the party primaries or even before the party primaries, there were such utterances. During the conventions, there were such utterances. And we are following the political actors. And we've sent a lot of warning signs to them. We have cautioned them. We've advised them. Even those that actually engage in actual violence and thuggery during the primaries, a good number of them were arrested and charged to court. I do know we have convictions. And in that exercise, we did not spare even the high and mighty. Anybody who put his hand in such a mess must have to pay, face the law. So we are responding to them, and I can assure you we're equal to the task.
How are you responding to them? From all you've said, the appropriate response has been basically advisory. Are you engaging them one-on-one? Are you engaging the politicians? Are you engaging the electorate? How are you engaging these players?
Yes, we are putting all our cards on the table. First of all, you have to advise somebody. My friend, this way to talk as a political actor, as an elder statesman. Where he fails, you can give him a warning, which we have done. And in many cases...
But obviously, it's not plain because we see the papers every day are washed with all sorts of utterances.
Yeah. This is a time of politicking. And you expect such hype. People want to sell their market, which is okay. But we're saying that they should watch their language, watch their utterances. They don't incite the gullible into violence. Because by and large, violence can consume anybody, including the very man who is initiating it.
Have you issued any warning? Has there been any official warning issued to any of these players?
We have gone beyond warning. We've done advisory. We've given warning. We have actually arrested and prosecuted some of them who went out of their way to cause problems during the primaries that have just been concluded.
All right, CP. Police Force Relations Officer, we thank you for joining us on this conversation. We acknowledge that you have a busy schedule ahead of you, so we'd like to say thank you for joining us this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the NTA, Africa's largest TV network. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll still have Professor Etanibe Alemeka in Jos and, of course, Professor Jibrin Ibrahim here with us.
In 2013, John Obi Mikel of Chelsea Football Club and Super Eagles midfielder was crowned Nigeria's king of the pitch, and His Excellency Senator Leon Imoke, CON, football-friendly governor of the year. Who will be Nigeria's king of football? Matchmakers Consult International and Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, presents the Nigerian Pitch Awards 2014 and its Night of Honors. Who will dethrone Vincent Iyama as goalkeeper of the year? Can Emmanuel Emenike remain Nigeria's striker of the year? Will Kano Pillars remain Nigeria's best club side? In 2013, you voted Super Eagles coach Stephen Kesh as coach of the year. Toyin Ibitoye, football journalist of the year TV. Adeojo Kere, football journalist of the year print. Bimbo Adeola, football journalist of the year radio. Chief Felix Anyansi, manager of the year. Guinness Nigeria PLC, best corporate sponsor of football of the year. And Lagos State, a state with the best grassroots football development program. Nigeria Pitch Awards, Nigeria's own football award.
Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
All right, thank you for joining us again. If you've just tuned in, you are watching Good Morning Nigeria GMN on the network service, and we have right here in the studio Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, Senior Fellow, Center for Democracy and Development. Will soon be joining our Enugu Network Center, and of course we have Professor Etanibi still with us in Jos. But Prof, we talked about earlier on how to mitigate the early warning signs before they erupt.
Yeah, really, early warning is extremely important. And one of the most important things we need to do now is to get citizens and civil society to immediately respond to statements and actions that are likely to lead to trouble. I think already monitoring centers are being set up. And the things to look for are incendiary language, inciting language, hate language. These are the types of things that provoke people into acts of violence. I think the question of our laws are very important in this regard. The politicians need to be very respectful of our laws. When you hear, for example, politicians saying that if we do not win, we will run a parallel government, you know that such statements go against the basic laws of this country. You hear others saying the results of the elections are known already. We are just waiting for the day to declare it. The results of the elections cannot be known until the elections take place and the votes are actually counted. I think what we need to do as a society is to start questioning these individuals who are making statements that are in reality inciting statements that could cause trouble for this country. I do not see enough of people questioning those individuals who are making those types of statements, because the purpose of early warning is early response. Because once you do not respond to the wrong things happening, then they will continue to happen. And it is this question of early response that's extremely important in this sense. And I think in terms of early response, first of all, there are the issues about things that break the law. Here, the role of the police and the judiciary is very important. And what everybody is saying is that the police has a responsibility to show that it is neutral in this difficult election in which you have an incumbent president and a strong opposition. The role of the police is not to side with each one, but to side with the law. Is something done that's against the law? Take it up, prosecute it, investigate the individual who has carried out that act and who has articulated those words. The second issue is community sanction. I think we as citizens need to start telling our politicians, our political class, that we have a standard of behavior that we expect from you. And if you do not keep to that standard of behavior, we will make sure that you will not get our votes. This question of the democratic sanction of the political class is extremely important. The third element is the importance of INEC itself doing its work correctly and efficiently. Because if people feel the elections themselves are conducted in a shambolic manner, then their confidence in the system drops. And that's when you begin to have recourse to ways that are not lawful or ways that are not peaceful. So various elements need to combine at this time to make the early warning and early responses to words and actions that could provoke violence needs to happen, and it needs to be everywhere in the country. We can't really, one of the things about elections in this country is that it's extremely difficult to predict where violence will erupt. In a lot of elections, people will think, oh, these are the trouble spots, but then the trouble will be somewhere completely different. So I think it is important that we are ready to respond to issues in all parts of the country and in the shortest possible time.
All right, we're now crossing over to our Enugu Network Center, where Mr. John Egbo, a retired deputy sheriff with the Los Angeles Council in the USA and former commissioner in Enugu State, is waiting to talk to us. Very good morning to you, Mr. Egbo.
Good morning to all of you Nigerians.
Now, thank you for joining us. We've gone far in this conversation, but perhaps I should take you back to the beginning. There has been palpable fear of possible violence, whether during or after these elections. This is coming despite assurances we keep getting from all critical stakeholders in the election process that all will be well. Yet that fear has simply refused to go among many Nigerians, including some very highly placed world organizations. And we're wondering if there are reasons, if there are foundations for these fears being expressed. What do you think?
Definitely, the fears are in the right place, and Nigerians have every reason to be very fearful, because in the past elections, there had been just a lot of violence. Almost all the elections since 1960 has been ridden with violence, and to that effect, every Nigerian has every concern to actually be very fearful and have a serious concern as to how to prevent this violence coming in these 2015 elections. But looking at it, it is the desperation of most politicians we have today, because they see politics as the major way to acquire wealth. And once you're a politician and you are elected in high place, you are given multiple Nigerian police force to guard one man, when in fact the Nigerian police is meant to guard the general public. To that effect, you become so powerful, you can actually intimidate and harass everyone. But the purpose of rigging the election, the desperation of politicians to win, and of course to acquire wealth, has been the bottom line and the basis for this election violence and rigging that actually prevent elections in Nigeria. So every Nigerian has every reason to be very concerned about what is going to happen in 2015.
Claire, but my worry is, shouldn't we have reasons to be comfortable considering all the measures that have been put in place? The electoral umpire has assured Nigerians over and over again that elections will be free and fair. The security agencies are saying we have everything in place to ensure that it doesn't happen. Shouldn't that be some sort of consolation?
Well, it cannot be any consolation at this time, because they've always said that they are ready to conduct elections in Nigeria. But if you take a look at what happened in Anambra last year, that you will begin to actually realize that, yes, every Nigerian has every reason to be very concerned. INEC had only one state that they are conducting an election at the time, and yet the materials were not able to reach all parts of the state. And of course, you saw the violence that followed it. Then you look at 2011, that when the present administration was elected, the police or the law enforcement agency told us that everything was in place. But you saw the violence that erupted in northern part of the country and some other parts of the country. So to that effect, we continue to express concern, because every Nigerian or most Nigerians have lost confidence on the law enforcement. And of course, the biasness or the partisan attitude of law enforcement has also made it very vulnerable for every Nigerian to actually express that such feelings. But what we are taking and what we are thinking is that every politician should be stripped of the police force attached to them. Every politician should be stripped of the police officers attached to them, and let these police officers patrol the streets, and let these police officers respond to the general public that they are meant to protect and also to prevent violence. Because the politicians are part of Nigeria, and they should not have exclusive right to having police officers as security guards.
Here, Mr. John Ebo, you are a retired deputy sheriff in the Los Angeles Council, USA. Now, you're trained, of course, to sniff, early signs, for violence and, of course, take action. Now, here in Nigeria, regards 2015 elections coming up in a few weeks' time, apart from the inciting and hate languages which provoke violence, we've also had insinuations that if one section of the country wins the election, there will be violence. If the other wins, there will be violence. So there have been suggestions that the big players in the parties take an undertaking or a kind of bond, of course, preventing violence before, during, and after elections. Might this be an early warning response?
Definitely. Taking a bond or sign an undertaking is what ought to happen even at the primary level. Because violence is not only at the general elections, it can also happen within intra-party elections. And if you see what has happened in many states across the country where they had primary elections and unpopular candidates were foisted on the party. And many of these popular candidates have left the party to other parties. That is a precursor that something is going to go wrong in this election, because the popular ones feel that they are going to win it, and the unpopular ones feel that, yes, indeed, their party is popular and should also force them against the general public's choice. To that effect, the consequences of what happens to those who perpetuate conflict or violence is not in place. And even if it is in place, it is not being enforced. In fact, if you go to the general public during the elections and you see a police officer, many people are not even scared of the police. The only time they get scared is either they see somebody that has to do with military, or they see somebody that has to do with mobile police. But regular police officers on the street during the election, they see them as just a bystander. If you give them 20 naira or 5 or 50 naira or 100 naira, that they're going to look the other way. So yes, indeed, consequences upon the politicians that breed violence ought to be in place. But again, you look at unemployment in the country. The unemployment of the youths, the extremely poverty level makes the youths vulnerable where they are recruited by these politicians to create violence. But again, the end point is how to rig the election and manipulate the general public and win the election illegally.
Sorry, Claire. Perhaps a way to check this, as others are suggesting, is in the place where you serve as deputy sheriff in the United States of America, there is something they call opinion polls that happen before elections. Now, this gives people an idea who is popular in what section of the country. So if the results eventually come during election, it's hardly any surprise. And people are saying perhaps we should begin to adopt that. Is this something we can do here?
The general public deserves to know. That's what the media is all about. But in Nigeria, media houses oftentimes are controlled by the politicians in high places. Again, as the result, as people vote and cast their votes in the polling units or booths, as you are coming out, the media personnel, both the newspaper and the television and the radio, they ought to ask you, who did you vote? Why did you vote for him? Again, if you take a cue of what they call random poll of these individuals, you will really, even before the end of the election, you will realize who had won in that particular election polling booth. But in Nigeria, many people do not want that, because again, if they go and rig the election and people already know who won, the violence will even be escalated further. So they want to keep it calm. Of course, if you look at the election of Abiola in 2000 and is it 2003 or something like that? What year was that? If you look at it, you will really realize that when Abiola was winning the election, the people, the government in power at the time, which was military, became agitated and had to cut FEDECO down, where they stopped announcing the results.
But in a very civilized society or a developing country, you should be allowed, the media should be allowed to take polls, should be allowed to announce results as they come in. INEC should also be able to announce it. But there may be a little different now that we have permanent voter registration cards, where if you vote, automatically should go into the computer and be able to count it. The general public and the media should be able to see the result as they vote in their polling booths. So it is the most democratic and the most civilized way to keep record of who is voting and who is winning.
Just a final word from you before we let you go. Let's quickly look at, we have just a few weeks to the elections. Let's quickly look at what the role of INEC and the traditional rulers as well as the people, how can they forestall violence? We've been able to identify the warnings, the early warning signals. Now, how can we prevent these signals from erupting? What should the traditional rulers, what should INEC, and what should the electorate themselves be doing at this point in time? Quickly.
INEC at this time should take a very proactive role and commence sensitization through all parts of the media, all parts of the country, and non-governmental agencies. Recruit them so that they can begin to go door to door and begin to actually advise the youth, advise the general public on how to vote, on how to, when they vote, to make sure they stay at the polling unit until the result is announced. Therefore, guarding the polling units, making it impossible for thuggery or thugs to come and lift the ballot boxes. The traditional rulers, on the other hand, ought to begin to commence sensitization of the residents, of their subjects in their respective areas. Of course, they are the chief security of their towns or their villages. They ought to begin to commence such sensitization where people are coming in, are getting educated on how to make sure that all their youths in the villages do not get induced by politicians by giving them small money to go and cause mayhem in the polling units. But again, what is more critical is that when you vote and you stay at the polling units, people will not, the tendency to commence violence will be highly decreased because everybody is there being a watchdog and watching what is going on at the polling stations.
Mr. John Abel, retired Deputy Sheriff, Los Angeles Council, USA, and former Commissioner in Enugu State. Thank you for joining our conversation and do have a pleasant day.
And also you do have a pleasant day.
All right, of course, just again to remind you, we still have Professor Tanibe in our Just Network Center. We'll also be joining Kaduna Network Center, where Barrister Mark Jacob, former Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice, Kaduna State, is standing by, and Professor Jibrin Ibrahim is still with us here in Abuja. We'll take a short break now.
Congress, APC, River State, the Right Honorable Chibuike Amechi, on behalf of the State Executive Committee of the party, the Greater Together Campaign Organization, and indeed all progressives in River State, welcomes our party flag bearer, His Excellency General Muhammadu Buhari retired, the National Chairman of the APC, Chief John Oyegun, National Leader Asiwaju Ahmed Tinubu, members of the National Working Committee and the National Executive Committee of the APC, progressive state governors, senators, speaker, and members of the House of Representatives, men and women, youth and party supporters, to the official flag-off of the General Muhammadu Buhari presidential campaign in River State, scheduled for Tuesday, the 6th of January, 2015. Venue, Adoke Amiesimaka Sports Stadium, Port Harcourt. Time is 7 a.m. Your Excellency, as you arrive River State to unfold your agenda for change in Nigeria, we welcome you to the home of the APC, to the state where change is not only a slogan but a fact, as you will bear witness when you commission our world-class schools, health centers, and roads built by the Amechi administration. Your Excellency, welcome to River State. Yele Ibote Oilua Namasi Oka. Announcer Ibim Seminitari, Honorable Commissioner for Information and Communications.
Thank you for remaining with us. We still have Professor Ibrahim here in our Abuja studios. Now, the comments being made by political actors in the country, as has been indeed identified by so many of our speakers, are responsible for, or are likely potentially to create this problem that we're talking about. But then we are discussing them without looking at those platforms that are being used to pass across these messages, principally the media in this case. What is the conduct of the media in a democratic setting like ours? What should they be doing?
You know, our Constitution gives the responsibility of consolidating democracy to the media, because the media, they are the ones who interface between the government and the people. Information is extremely critical. We are in a context in which you have political actors that are ready to say things that they shouldn't say. The way to articulate these issues are through the media, and if the media has a high sense of responsibility in terms of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, then they'll be playing a very positive role in terms of making sure the democracy flows freely. We do have very restrictive conditions in terms of broadcasting. The Nigerian Broadcasting Commission controls things. But of course, the media today has become much more complex. The social media has become a very important element in terms of the communication space, and that space is not under the control of the state or government. And that therefore, I think it's important to emphasize civic education, that people can tweet out things without anybody being able to control them, and you are not even sure who it is behind that tweet or that Facebook comment. And I think in this age where the media itself is transforming, it is very important that people have the civic engagement to know that what they say has implications for the survival of the country. It has implications for peace in this country, and that therefore they need to be very careful in terms of what is articulated. It is also important for people to know what to believe and what to take seriously. It's irresponsible for citizens to see a statement on Twitter and believe it's the gospel truth, because that person making the statement is not known. The veracity of the information is often doubtful, and that therefore we need to use the mass media to educate ordinary citizens that you should be very careful about the source of information you believe in and you act upon. We saw in the last elections that there were a lot of false statements that were articulated in the social media. There are, of course, a lot of true statements that were articulated, but there are also false statements. So I think people should be very cautious in terms of navigating the new complex media space that we live in today.
Okay, Professor Jibrin, thank you for your perspectives. We now join our Kaduna Network Center, where Barrister Mark Jacob, former Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice, Kaduna State, is standing by. Barrister Jacob, thank you for joining us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Very much, and good morning.
All right, now a lot of people here lack confidence in our conflict resolution mechanism. And of course, talking about the judiciary now, apart from the fact that justice gets delayed, most times people get denied justice. But as regards electoral matters, the proposal of the Ways Panel report, of course, which recommended the establishment of the Electoral Offences Commission, becomes very, very expedient in terms of resolution of violence, electoral violence.
Certainly, the judiciary or the conflict resolution mechanisms embedded in the Nigerian law requires some correction or amendment. As a lawyer, I have gone to tribunals during elections or after elections. And I know one of the basic challenges the judiciary has is the fact that those who perpetrate violence are given some kind of cover indirectly, because as other discussants have said, politicians give birth to the violence that we see by their statements and by their conduct during and after the elections. But they are protected by law, because the Electoral Act makes it impossible for you to say that so and so person is responsible for this electoral offense, unless, in fact, the election result cannot be affected by such violence unless you can trace it directly to the politician that contested the election. So that portion of the law requires panel-beating. A lot of things happen in this country, and the police are either helpless or they are culprits in the issues. And I'm very serious about it, because when you say you are proactive and people make statements that are clearly intended to instigate violence, and the only thing you do is to advise them, you have done nothing. There should be a process where people are called to account for everything they say. Now, the courts are left helpless because the police, like I said, will either not bring people before the courts, or even when they want to bring anyone, they'll go and bring the small kids who are the finishers of what was planted by the politician. So we need to have a system that calls people to account for statements that are very clear, targeted at instigating violence. It's not at all in doubt that most of our politicians, particularly as we approach 2015, politicians are already preparing the minds of people to go into violence. Where a politician, for instance, says that if he doesn't win, he will form a parallel government, that is not a kind statement. That is not democratic. That is not a show of responsibility. And if such a politician is allowed to walk around, even with police cover, after saying such things, then we are in trouble. We also have the situation where our traditional institutions, particularly in the North, and I'm worried about the North because that is my constituency. And from 2011, the casualties of electoral violence in the North have been more than any part of this country. We are seeing hundreds of people, some of them who had no business with the politicians, who had, in fact, some of them didn't vote. Some of them didn't even know what the result of the election was. But overnight, some of them were killed. We have people who have lost all basic means of livelihood because their businesses were destroyed in the wake of the 2011 elections. And nothing has happened. Most of them have been left to live in their own sorrows and in their losses. And it is very clear that nobody, particularly our traditional rulers, the traditional system has collapsed because our traditional rulers that we had in those days, they were non-partisan, they were concerned about everybody, they were interested in protecting everybody living within their domain. Today you have traditional rulers who are on the loose, talking on behalf of politicians, endorsing politicians and insisting that those politicians must rule. And tomorrow they go back and wear the turban and sit down in those palaces. What happens if those persons that they have endorsed do not win? As far as I'm concerned, these are preparations for a very serious show of fighting and violence if some people lose the election. And the police are telling me that the only thing they have done is to advise. So it's a scary situation. preparatory to 2015 elections, and unless we change our approach, the police must deliberately change this issue of advising politicians, particularly the big fishes. We cannot have a situation where people prepare the younger ones to kill each other, and then they go scot-free. This is my concern. And therefore, the conflict resolution mechanism, I agree with the doctor in your studio there who says that when we just depend on the courts, any situation that makes it impossible or makes it mandatory for us to depend on the courts to resolve electoral issues, it's a prerequisite, or it's a signal that many things are wrong and are going to fail.
Well, I was going to add to the point he's making. There is also provision of the Electoral Act 2010 as amended that actually provides for disqualification of politicians who are associated with thuggery or violence. Now, we have not seen this happen anywhere, and we're wondering, is it that the laws are deficient or it's a problem of implementation?
That INEC or the police do not have the willingness and the desire to implement that portion of the law. Because they should explain actually why. The law exists for such politicians to be disqualified. But like you said, nobody has ever been disqualified because of that provision. And therefore, it goes to buttress the fact that issues pertaining to electoral violence and thuggery cannot be resolved largely through the law or through the courts. It has to start from our communities. And like I said, I'm worried about the North because everything has collapsed. And our traditional institutions are culprit in this matter. And we have seen a situation where Northerners who should be concerned that our environment has become the theater of war. Our environment has lost all economic glamour. Our environment in the North has lost the beauty it used to present, where people from other parts of the country used to feel free to come and stay. People are relocating in their hundreds preparatory to this 2015 election. And nobody seems to care. We have situations where worship houses are being used to spew out messages that are not targeted at building bridges, but are targeted at saying, so and so candidate is our own. If he doesn't win, the election has been rigged. And therefore, we will not agree. That is preparatory to violence. And somebody is saying he's just advising people who say such things. It's not that the security agencies don't know. It's not that INEC does not have this information, because these things are not hidden. They are said on microphones, on loudspeakers every day. They are published in the newspapers. And I agree with the doctor, the professor there, who also said a little bit about the media. We have politicians who own media houses, and the only thing they specialize in doing is mention or say things that are injurious to the fabric, or the very fabric of the existence of this country. And nobody has called them to order. Nobody appears to have the willpower to call people to account for things that they publish. The Freedom of Information Bill or Act that now exists is being taken to the extreme, where people say things anyhow. And because they have the wherewithal to publish, they publish it and repeat it every day. We have journalists who are media consultants to politicians. What is their work? They continuously spew out hate. Instead of debate on issues, we have politicians whose media aides specialize in only advancing insults on every other person. How do we hope to build a country with leaders who believe in this kind of ideology or this kind of approach, where the only way you hope to win an election or to get people to vote for you is to be radical? Radical after you have spent all your years enjoying. And then it is now that you want to be radicalized, you want to be so-called patriotic. It's fake. And we have people are doing these things deliberately. Nigerians, we have refused to call people by their names. And I'm sorry to use the word, sometimes some of these actions are actually rascal actions that should be called to order. People who are supposed to be matured, 60 years and above, talking as if they are 20 or 19. And our children begin to ask us, what is wrong with you, daddy? This is your uncle, because some of them are our uncles. Yet when they pick the microphone and they speak, you want to hide your face in shame. What is wrong with this country? It's not really that we don't have brains or that we don't have patriots. It is just that a handful of people who God has blessed to have means, who have access to media, who have access to humongous wealth, are using all these things wrongly. And they are dividing the country by every minute and second of their life. And they don't care. I participated in the commission of inquiries that were set up in the wake of the 2011 crisis. And I know that a large number of the victims were market women, school teachers, youth corpers, poor police officers that were on duty. They were the victims. Hundreds of them were slaughtered in the markets, in the streets, in the churches, everywhere.
Okay, Mark Jacob, just in a few words before we let you go, in just a few words, what would you have the police begin to do now as we march to the elections? Mr. Mark Jacob, we just would like you to round off all you've been saying. What would you have the police do in just a few words?
Must truly be proactive. They should stop all this issue of advising people or cautioning people. There are provisions of our law that empower the police to arrest not just a small boy who happens to go out insulting or shouting slogans, but to arrest the man who initiated it and take people to court. Let them be exonerated in the courts. We want to see some big fishes standing trial. Even if they are not going to be convicted, probably because of some power play or so, but let the police do their part so that we can have confidence that nobody is completely protected.
Okay, Mark Jacob, former Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice, Kaduna State, many thanks to you for joining our conversation. And we're back to Abuja, where Professor Jibrin Ibrahim is, of course. We would just like to have your final words on this. What would you have Nigerians and, of course, the big players in the game of politics begin to do right now, so that we don't want the perilous predictions or warnings or advices or whatever to come true? We must forestall any act of violence before they erupt. What should we begin to do?
I think the first thing is for them to be conscious of their own enlightened self-interest. If you provoke a situation of total breakdown of law and order, then you, as the big politician with a big office, your own future and your own life is at risk. I think a lot of comments have been made that the people at the front end of the violence are young people who are not the real instigators. But when violence reaches a certain level, it will get to the instigators. So that's the first issue. The second issue is that Nigerians have always had a commitment to democracy. We've had, for the first time in our history, 16 years of continuous democratic rule. It is important to maintain that. To maintain it, you have to play by the rules of the game. The rules of the game are simple. Do not use words that incite. Be faithful to legal procedures. Elections are very simple matters. People express their choice. The choice is counted, and everybody is given what he got If you falsify that, you create a sense of injustice. When we review the history of electoral violence in this country, we'll see that the root cause of electoral violence is widespread perceptions of injustice. People feel that the choices they made were not respected, or they were blocked from being able to make their choice, and therefore feel they have been cheated, they have been violated, and react in ways that are against the law. This issue of justice is, I think, the key issue we must be faithful to if we want peaceful elections.
Prof, let's cross over to your colleague in Just Network Center for his final words as well. Professor Alemika, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, you've heard the conversation and contribution from all those who participated on this program today. Let's give you the platform now to advise Nigerians, and by Nigerians I mean including all the stakeholders. What should we do? In a few sentences, what should we do to avert violence during and after these elections?
We have discussed electoral violence, and I think what we've discussed are symptoms of a deep-rooted problem we have, the lack of democratic culture in this country, and the lack of rule of law. I think the police have been identified as very critical, but let me note that even the structure, the architecture of our security system in Nigeria today has, in some ways, reduce the capacity of the police to do what we are expecting it to do with the multitude of forces we have and the increasing marginalization of the force within the entire security architecture. So I think what we can do in the next 5 weeks that we have is to plead with politicians not to use a emotive platform. Many of them are running into churches and mosques. I think this is one of the service to Nigeria because it is an emotive platform. Many of them are depending on regional and ethnic platform. This is a disservice to Nigeria, and these are the most volatile sources of electoral violence. I think also the media need to do some editing of violent language, incitement as a service to the nation. I think electorate also should disqualify, if official organs are not disqualifying, should disqualify a lot of people making hate or their candidates who are making hate statements by not voting for such candidates. This just 5 weeks to the first election, and I think after the election, NTA and many other media will actually help us to look at the long-term problem we're dealing with as if it's an event. The election violence is not an event, it's an outcome of a deep-rooted problem of lack of weak political culture, and what finally I will regard we need to deal with. Today, there is no other enterprise that can give you the kind of reward you get from politics. And I always like to categorize this that the only competition with politics in Nigeria today is only organized crime, and that politics itself in Nigeria today and governance in Nigeria today is a form of organized criminal activity. And once you have organized criminal activity, you have violence, and there is nothing you can do about it. So we need to transform these activities we call politics, which is nothing but organized criminal activity, into democratic activity, whereby people are elected because they want to govern and deliver development.
Prof, many thanks to you. Professor Etanibe Alemika, Professor of Criminology from the University of Jos. We do thank you so much for your contributions this morning. Thank you. Very good day.
Also like to thank Professor Jibril Ibrahim, Professor of Political Science and Senior Fellow, Center for Democracy and Development here in Abuja. Prof, thank you very much for joining the conversation. And of course, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Ibrahim, Professor Tanibi's rounded it up. We need to transform political activity into a democratic activity. That way, we deal with this electoral violence, which he said is just symptom of a deep-rooted problem. This is Good Morning Nigeria. You have the next segment.
Prof had very strong words for those, but we'll leave it at that and begin to round off now because our time is fast spent. Suffice it to leave Nigerians with the message that we all have a stake to play here. Let's make these elections violence-free. Thank you for watching Good Morning Nigeria. We've got to go now. My name is Ibrahim Adra.
And of course, I'm Claire Adelabu Abdurazak. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same station. Bye for now.